Are you happy now? This is the question. Well, good morning. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Sue Sutherland, and I'm a Tearfund speaker. I'm not for too far away. I'm from Bury, so it didn't take me long this morning, and we had the fog as well. So I woke up to fog, so I don't know how far it extends, but it certainly extends to Bury. So thank you for inviting me, and I want to thank you on behalf of Tearfund for all the work and the support you've given us. And apparently you've been supporting Tearfund for over 20 years now. So thank you very much. And I was hearing from Diane all the other societies and missions and people that you support as well. So thank you for all the generosity that you have. And I wonder, do any of you know how old Tearfund is? I mean, they had a big birthday last year. You know what it's like when you have a big birthday. You have a celebration. So Tearfund was 50 last year, so it'll be 51 now. Some of you might not have been around 50 years ago, and some of us may have been. And why it started was, if we go way back to 1968, do you remember the old little black and white TVs? You switched it on and went to make a cup of tea 5 minutes before you wanted the program to start. So, yeah, it did take a while to warm up. And what happened in 98, there was if you remember, the Biafran crisis in Nigeria, the Nigerian civil war. And for the first time, what was happening around the world came into people's living rooms. You turned the TV on, and for the first time, people saw suffering of others. And at that time, the Evangelical Alliance's headquarters were inundated with Christians and churches pleading that they do something and help someone, and loads of money was sent at that time. So what happened was the Evangelical Alliance Relief Fund was started, and that's what Tearfund means, if you don't know, the Evangelical Alliance Relief Fund. At the time, no more than a drawer in the offices, but now it's a big organisation. And in the last financial year, Tearfund provided life-saving emergency cover, so that's the emergency cover, for over 1 million people. And 3.8 million people were helped through long-term developmental work. So over 91,000 generous people like yourselves entrusted us with nearly £75 million, so quite a lot. It seems a lot, because I certainly haven't got £75 million tucked away somewhere. But is it just a drop in the ocean? Is the problem that we are facing in the world today too big? And we're still receiving pictures into our living rooms, aren't we? Into our TV screens of Yemen, Syria, parts of sub-Saharan Africa and other places in the world. We're still seeing the crisis. But actually, no, it's not a drop in the ocean. We are making an effect. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. Tearfund's vision is a pretty big vision, this, but Tearfund's vision is to see the end of absolute poverty in our lifetimes. I don't know whose lifetime, because some of us have probably got a bit shorter than others, but the end of absolute poverty in our lifetime. And that is a really big vision. But that's the vision we are given in the Bible, the vision of this kingdom of God. And the vision that John describes in Revelation, it's not a daydream, it's a reality. And it's a picture of what God has done, he is doing, and will continue to do. It's a picture of Jesus' death and the resurrection. Jesus' death and resurrection inaugurates this kingdom of God. And God, through his Spirit, enables us and will continue to work in the world to reveal his kingdom. And that's a very big vision, as I've just said. So I'd like to have 10 volunteers, please, to stand up. That's all I'm going to ask you to do. I'm not asking you going to do anything else other than stand up. So 10 volunteers, please. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Come on. 6, 7, 8, 9. 10. Thank you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Could one of you sit down? Thank you. No. Sit down. Come. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Can you stand up at the back of your set? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It won't work unless there's 10. So each one of you, 10 people, represent 10% of the world's population. So you're standing here today representing a lot of people. That's 10% of the world's population. 40 years ago, the world was divided with just over half the people living in homes, had education, free to travel. We had opportunities, employment, healthcare. So just over half the world's population had those wonderful things which we experience in this country. So that's just over half. I'm going to ask 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people to sit down. Thank you. So within 40 years, we've halved it. So we're still left with half. 1, 2, 3, 5. We're still left with 50% of the world's population. Is that me? So today, there are billions of people living in poverty in countries like South Africa, Mexico, Brazil, Thailand, Malaysia, and other countries. For them, life has changed radically. Since 1999, the total number of people living in extreme poverty has declined by about 50 million a year. So huge strides. And these are all the World Bank estimates. So I'm going to ask 1, 2, 3, 4 people to sit down. Can you stay up at the back? Thank you. So, since 1999, we've now been left with 10% of the world's population living in extreme poverty. It's a lot less than 40 years ago, but there's still more to be done. It still represents, got the figure somewhere, over 50 million people. So that's still a lot of people. No, it's not. 600 million people. I'm reading the wrong number. It still represents 600 million people. So still a lot of people in the world living in extreme poverty. Thank you very much. It's actually 9% of the world's population. So when you came in, you would have been given this. And this is the current campaign from Tearfund. So this lady here at the front, she's called Ruth. And we're going to show a film, and we're going to hear Ruth talking about herself. And Ruth is one of these 9% of people, represented by the lady at the back there, who lives in extreme poverty. She's married, and she has 5 surviving children, and 2 of the children still live at home with her. They live in a very poor community in a remote area of northern Nigeria. There's no sanitation, and there's only pond water to drink. So changes in weather patterns and the daily problems of accessing water for her fields has meant that harvests are very poor. And her family experience a hunger gap of at least 3 months every year. Now, a hunger gap is the gap between the food running out and the next time the crops produce food. So for 3 months, there's nothing. What does she do? Her family are begging for more food, as you can imagine, can't you? Mum, I'm hungry. And her and her husband know the struggle to feed her family. Can't pay for schooling, so the children have to come out of school and are falling behind. So she was desperate for her life to change, and she needed a breakthrough. So we're going to watch a film now, please. Thank you. And this will show Ruth. The less is more, yeah. Not the slideshow. That comes later.
Life in this community can be very difficult. What makes life so difficult is the lack of food. My dream is to have enough money to meet all our needs. I will pay for my children's education, build a good house, and have savings to deal with any problems that we face. My name is Ruth, and I am married with 6 children. 3 have left home and sadly, one passed away. So I live with my husband and 2 youngest children. We suffer periods of hunger that sometimes last 5 or 6 months. Then we just eat 1 meal a day, and I have to forage for food and live off the little that we have and are able to grow. I try my very best, but the times when I cannot provide food for my children is a huge problem for me. Sometimes my children are sent away from school because I can't afford to pay the fees. Fetching firewood is our only source of income to take care of the family.
Kokida community is a very poor community, lacking potable drinking water, has poor agricultural practices, but the greatest challenge is inadequate food. We have started addressing the needs of these communities by organizing Church Awakening Bible studies through the support of Tearfund that would eventually help communities lift themselves out of poverty. Through the process, there have been self-help groups that have been formed.
I joined a self-help savings and loans group 1 year ago, and it has helped me make a change in my life. After the first year out, I bought 2 bags of fertilizer. In the past, I harvested 3 to 5 bags of maize, but last harvest yielded 13 bags. The church facilitators also taught us to diversify our crops. If I plant 1 bean and it yields, I can harvest about 70 to 80 beans. I also bought a chicken and 2 pigs, so I thank God for what He has been doing in my life. It awakened me to look for opportunities, and it has helped my faith. Now I put my trust in God. Our farm is very small and not large enough to sell the produce, so I hope to breed livestock. That way, anytime I have a problem, I can sell them to meet our needs, because I have a lot of needs. But still, my most urgent challenge is lack of food and periods of hunger. I want people to pray for me, that God will protect me and God will guide me, that there will be total transformation for my family. I believe the self-help group will bring about that change.
Small changes have started to transform Ruth's life.
With this little, it will one day be something.
Give what you can and see how your gifts are powerful in God's hands.
Thank you for listening. So I explained in the film, Ruth has the main problem is feeding her children. So just imagine how you would feel in the morning, those of us who have children or had children when they were younger. That's normally when you have children, isn't it? But you know what I mean. And can you imagine getting up every morning, not having any breakfast, not having enough money to send them to school? I had a very hungry teenage boy who would eat all his breakfast, eat his lunch, come home, open the cupboard, eat a packet of biscuits, eat his entire tea set in front of him, and at 8 o'clock still look for some more biscuits. So can you imagine not being able to do that? Can you imagine if your baby was ill or your small child was ill, not being able to afford to go to the doctor, not being able to afford to buy the medication if needed? And these are harsh realities of people living on less than $2 a day. So Tearfund, the way Tearfund work is through partners, and you heard the man there speaking, and he is one of the partners working in Ruth's area. And they've begun to work in Ruth's village, as you saw. And they started a church and community transformation program. And through that, people learn, and Ruth is learning, and others, better farming techniques, how to diversify crops to cover that hunger gap, and by saving money in a self-help group. And you saw Ruth there putting away a small amount. And those are the ways which have been proven to start a transformation in people's lives. She has more food for her children. She wants a metal roof for her home and money to send her children to school. You know, she's not asking much, is she? No, she's asking for the basics. And there's such a chronic need across the world, but it doesn't have to be like that. now that, we live in the 21st century and people are still suffering. So our passage from Scripture this morning was Mark 6, the feeding of the 5,000. A very familiar passage, isn't it? We all know that passage. And it describes a situation where there was a great need. There was a spiritual hunger. Jesus recognized this. They wanted to see Jesus. Jesus was trying to go somewhere to have a little bit of a rest and rest up with the disciples. But they followed Jesus. They wanted to have more. And there was a material hunger as well. The people were hungry. They were hungry for healing and hungry for food. And it's the same today. We know there's a spiritual hunger. We know there is in our own communities. People are hungry for a spiritual reality, for hope, for peace, for a meaning to life. And there's a material hunger we can see, and we can see that around us as well as across the world. So the story addresses situations where there is a great need. And it raises questions about, in the story, first of all, our responsibility to those in need and how we can best help those in need. So let's have a look at the first question, our responsibility to those in need. So verse 34 of that passage says, when Jesus landed and saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them, because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things. So it says here and in other Gospels that repeat the same story, that Jesus healed the sick. And it goes on to say he had concern for their hunger as well, their material things. So Jesus was not only bothered about the spiritual side, he was concerned about the physical needs as well. And when he saw the large crowd, he had compassion on them. Jesus had compassion. And that is contrasted there to the disciples' compassion. They were tired, and they were inclined to leave the people and to find their own food. And verse 35 says, by this time it was late in the day. So the disciples came to him. This is a remote place, they said, and it's already very late. Send the people away so that they can go to the surrounding countryside and buy themselves something to eat. That was the disciples' reaction. You can imagine, they were busy, they were tired, it was getting late. They'd already done a lot of ministry. I don't know about you, but if you're busy on a Sunday, and Sundays tend to be some Christians, some of the busiest times. I'm about to nip to my church for a business meeting this afternoon. So you get busy, don't we, as Christians? Sunday night, all we want to do is sit down and watch Strictly Results, isn't it? Or David Attenborough. We don't want the knock at the door. We don't want the phone call. Somebody else is in need. That's what they wanted. They wanted their own version of sitting and watching Strictly Results. And I don't want to be inconvenienced sometimes. And there are limits sometimes to what I'm prepared to give when I'm happy to help, and at other times when I just want to get home and put my feet up and put the kettle on. And it's easy sometimes to switch off. But that was not how Jesus' response did. The disciples wanted to go home, but Jesus didn't let them off the hook that easily. And in verse 37, Jesus says, you give them something to eat. That must have been a bit of a shock. We have a responsibility. Jesus says, you do it. We can't just turn a blind eye and to people's problems living in this country and also abroad. We need to be careful not to limit the scope of the gospel to just spiritual things, but there are material needs as well. And that's part of our responsibility as Christians. And throughout Scripture, we read that God has a bias to the poor. He's concerned for widows, for orphans, for immigrants, for the poor. So the second question is how to help others in need. So this is a slightly deeper question. The disciples' response to the challenge to feed everyone was disbelief. And Jesus says, you go and feed them. But we haven't got anything. They said, well, it would take 7 months of a normal average wage to feed this lot. And we read that there was 5,000 men. And it's been estimated, along with women and children, it was probably nearer 10,000. So a large, very, very large group of people. The disciples were overwhelmed. How can they possibly feed so many people? There was such great need. But Jesus says something different. He has a different mind to the disciples. He sees things differently. Jesus asks the question, how much bread do you have? In other words, he asks, what have you got? What have you got in your hands? Not what do you not have? Not how much are we missing, but how much do you have? And really, it's almost laughable, isn't it? They come along with these 5 loaves and a couple of fishes. Very little to feed over 5,000 people. But Jesus says, that's okay. That's enough. We're going to use what we have. With our Father in heaven, that's enough. That's fine. And then we see something amazing, don't we? We've known that story for many, many years, many of us, and it kind of washes over us. But when we think how amazing a story, that as they give out those 5 loaves and a couple of fishes, it spread and spread and spread and spread. So much that there was 12 basketfuls left over. And with God, less is more, as it says on the front of that leaflet. Less is more. There's enough to feed everyone with food left over. And the miracle takes place. So he doesn't focus on what we don't have. God focuses on what we do have. So that story wonderfully illustrates how Tearfund works. So at the heart of our community transformation work, we help people to see things differently. Help people to see not what they don't have, but what they actually do have and what they can do. And this brings a change in the mindset and results in total transformation, which is what Ruth said she wanted. And that's what happened to Ruth. We started working in Ruth's church, and she was helped to understand that through this story and other Bible stories and passages, see how God is concerned not only for her spiritual life, but for her struggles that she and her family are experiencing. Ruth had a fresh encounter with God, and that helped her to discover God's love and God's care for her. We started self-help groups, which is one of the ways in which Tearfund work, and one of the ways which has been proved to be the most successful. And in these groups, people learn to share every area of their lives together. They grow in faith, and they support and pray for one another, just like we do. But it also has an economic side to it as well. Each person in the group pays a tiny amount every week, sometimes just pennies, into a microcredit fund, in which they can take loans at a very, very low interest. And Ruth took a loan. That's what she said in the film. She took a small loan, and she bought fertilizer with her loan. And with the new techniques she learnt, her yields rocketed. Remember what she said? She had 8. What was it? I can't remember. She got 8. I can't remember. Yeah, I can't remember exactly what that was. But, pardon? 6 bags. That was it. And it went to 13 bags. I couldn't remember what the 6 and the 13 were. It was the bags, thank you. Yeah. And her yields dramatically increased. And it's made a difference to Ruth. She was also shown how to plant beans, different types of beans, which yield the crop at different times. So that hunger gap between the food she was running out and the next harvest was cut because of this food growing and yielding at different times. And using new methods, she learned that one tiny bean can produce 70 to 80 beans. She diversified her crops. So now Ruth and her family, they have dignity. They're not dependent on handouts. which is a great way how Tearfund work. So that shows that God can take whatever you can give and transform it and help transform people's lives. We give, and he multiplies our efforts. So Ruth learned to give what little was in her hand, what little she can give each week into the savings fund. Just as the disciples used what little they had, the 5 loaves and 2 fishes, to transform their lives. So again, I would like you to pick up the card, and that is in your hands. And you've got a chance now to transform people's lives. And as I said at the beginning, Tearfund's big vision is to see the end of absolute poverty in our lifetime. So we don't have to have one person stood up in our lifetime. So just for ourselves, a few pence a day can transform the mindsets that hold people like Ruth in that poverty gap. So how much does it cost to help a family like Ruth's into that training scheme that she was in? If you are willing to pay £12 a month for a year, you can have 2 families receiving the skills training through the self-help group and provide for their family. So we're all good at maths, aren't we? For £6 a month, how many families would we help? If for £12 we help 2 families, £6 will help 1 family. I knew you were good at maths over here in Middleton. So £6 a month will help 1 family get out of poverty and provide for themselves. And that actually is only 17 pence a day. So it's over to you really now. And it would be great if you could fill in this form. Those of you who are able to. I know some people are not able to. And I know some people already give to other places. You're already supporting as a church other organisations, and we do appreciate that. But if you are able, it would be great if you could offer today or take this away and consider how you are going to support Tearfund. And if you'd like to fill this in, you could hand it to me. And even if you don't know your details, somebody from Tearfund can get back to you and discuss with you what you're able to give. So if you'd like to take that away or leave it behind, that would be lovely, thank you. And as a little sweet today, I have some little gifts. So if you fill this in and give it to me, I have these little bags, and it says, "Watch your gift pop into life, Tearfund." And inside this bag, which is why I have to keep it very tightly closed, is some popcorn. That's all. And in the bag, there's a recipe for peri-peri popcorn. I've not tried it. I might try it sometime. And some prayers for Tearfund. So I've got some of those to give out if anybody fills that in and hands it to me today. So I'm going to finish with a prayer for Ruth. And after I've finished this short prayer, I'm going to have the slideshow. Thank you. And I will be, we have coffee in the back room, don't we? Don't you? Yes, yeah. I will be in there. I've set up a little table there with some Tearfund information. So if you'd like to come and chat to me, I'll be there afterwards. Thank you very much. So